let's talk for a minute. First, about the YouTube updates. I initially said I was going to update this every other week, but because of extenuating life circumstances, that hasn't been happening. And I'll talk about that right now. So I told my Patreons this, and I've told a lot of my freelance clients this, but I haven't made it public because the day job that I work at didn't make it public until yesterday. So here's what's happening. I work at a craft store in the mornings, stocking up the shelves, making sure the store's clean and all that stuff. Unfortunately, the store is closing. And it's not the fault of the business. What happened was the county commissioner raised up the rent, and the craft store was negotiating with the county commissioner to try to keep the rent lower so that they could stay in business, and the county commissioner would not budge. So, because of that, the craft store is closing. I'm gonna reiterate this and drive the point home. It is not the business's fault that I am losing this job. The business has been actually really supportive with not just myself, but with everybody at the store and helping them to transition out from this current location to other ones. They actually offered to help transfer me over to a different craft store and work on the truck crew there. But here's the thing. I had been thinking about quitting this day job and going freelance full-time for at least 4 or 5 months before I got the news. I got the news that the store was closing back in December. It just wasn't public knowledge until yesterday, January 16th. When that announcement became known to us, I kind of took this as like a sign from the universe that I should just quit the day job and just pursue full-time freelancing. And when I spoke with my other clients about what was happening and the news of my employment situation with the day job, they said, "Oh, don't worry, we got lots of work ahead for you, so we got you covered." Which is really, really nice. Like, freelancing, while it'll help cover a lot of the bills, it won't cover all of the bills. Kind of like how the 2 Patreon pages that I run, one for validation, one for the other comics that I do. Yes, I have 2 separate comic pages because validation is written by Christian Baranick and drawn by me. And the other Patreon page that I run is just under my name, and that's for the other comics that I do, like Thoughtful Dinosaur and Johnson and Sir. Just to clarify, Christian and I can at least cover some of the basis with producing validation. It doesn't cover all of them though, so if you like validation and what we do, there's a link to the validation Patreon page down in the description. If for some strange reason you don't like validation, but you like the work that I do, like Johnson and Sir, Thoughtful Dinosaur, Charlie and Clow, and most recently, The Case of the Wendigo, especially if you want to make The Case of the Wendigo keep happening, there's a link to my personal Patreon page down in the description. That is for the people who want to keep those webcomics up and running and help give us like a little tip as we are producing comic strips for those related projects. So Patreon's gonna help, freelancing is going to help. Another thing that's going to help a lot is if you just buy some stuff from me on Store Envy. I do have a Store Envy shop. That link is also in the description. That has my comics, my mini comics. I got a lot of mini comics and prints, mini prints, and soon buttons. I'm getting into the button game finally. I found a person that'll produce buttons for me. They're wee. I made these for the Thoughtful Dinosaur Kickstarter backers, and there's other faces too, like this one of Timmy, and then this lady, and then this lady. Speaking of Thoughtful Dinosaur, the Kickstarter rewards are, at this point, 90% done. I only have 4 backers left to take care of, and I'm working on their commissions right now. This is actually one of the commissions. You're not supposed to look at this one. So I am working on those, and I only have 4 of those left. Once I'm done with those 4, they're gonna get mailed out with all of the other rewards, and then once I get done with that, the Kickstarter is done. This will lead into my second to last bit of news. Once the commissions for the Kickstarter are done, I will be available for commissions. Like, whether you want me to draw a D&D character of yours, if you want me to draw some original characters from a novel that you're working on, whatever it may be, I will be available for commissions once the Thoughtful Dinosaur stuff is done. The first ones to find out, though, are going to be the people who are subscribed to my email newsletter. That link is also in the description. They're the first ones to find out, and they get special discount rates on commissions depending on what commission that I offer for that week. And now, to bring it back full circle, now that I'm going to be going freelance full-time and there's going to be a lot more time on my schedule, I should be able to update the videos on a more consistent basis. Now, gonna tie in all of these other little topics together to address this one. The last date that the store that I work at will be open is supposed to be February 23rd. Odds are we may close sooner than that, but the projected final date is February 23rd. So I have until then to get these Thoughtful Dinosaur rewards done, open myself up for commissions, and get maybe 1 or 2 other freelance clients, and see if maybe we can meet some Patreon funding goals on validation and my personal Patreon page. I have until February 23rd to get most of that in order. Until that date, you're not going to see very many YouTube updates from me. However, after February 23rd, the goal is to update the YouTube much more consistently and also branch out into other things besides Review Day Tuesday, because I would love to do more vlog format stuff. Kind of like the Thomcast a little bit, but not necessarily. I do also want to do some more experiments in just video making, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm heavily inspired by WheezyWaiter, and there's a lot of things that he does that makes me go, I want to try that! For sure though, I'm going to be keeping Review Day Tuesdays around because I did finish 2 books recently. The Blood of Elves by, I can't pronounce this person's name, so I'm just going to have his name right here, and The Museum of Intangible Things by Wendy Wonder. Whew. Now, when it comes to the Review Day Tuesday format, when I finally bring it back for realsies, I'm going to change up the format a little bit because I do want to get more in-depth with some of the reviews that I do, particularly with novels, because one thing that I've noticed in the booktube community is that whenever they talk about books, they talk about, oh, it was so good, but they don't tell about why it's good without relying on like talking about the characters. And I'd like to be able to talk a bit more about like word choice, how the book is paced, and how it addresses the themes that the book is built on and things like that. That way it's a bit more substantive. Right now I feel like there's a lot of reviewers that don't have a lot of substance to their reviews. The only substance that they provide is, oh, this was a good book, you should check it out. And I'll admit, I feel like I've been guilty of that in the past in my other videos, and I would like to improve on that. I'd like to be able to provide more substance. Now, here's the other thing about the Review Day Tuesdays. When I had first started it, I initially wanted to just keep it to comics, but then expand into other things like books and music and movies and things like that. I'm gonna keep it to just indie comics and novels. For 2 reasons. 1, there's enough people talking about movie reviews. 2, I'm not 100% expert enough in music to do proper critiques of music. I'm only just learning, again, how to music. The ukulele, her name is Freddie, was an instrument that I had played for about a year when I was in college, and then I dropped, not literally dropped, but I metaphorically dropped the instrument and just actively pursued comics on a more full-time basis, and kind of let my ukulele skills fall by the wayside. I want to get back into playing ukulele because there's a few songs that I do want to write, but I'm not quite at the skill yet to write songs. Back to the things that I do want to review. I do want to talk about indie comics because there's enough reviewers that cover the big two, Marvel and DC. There's also a lot of people that cover like Dark Horse, and there's not a lot of people who review the indie comics that do it in a substantive way. There was somebody on Twitter who had made the very astute observation of people who review independent comics, which includes webcomics, are often very soft on the works. Like, they don't want to hurt the creator's feelings. And I understand why they wouldn't want to hurt the creator's feelings. I really do. As somebody that creates independent comics and webcomics, I get it. Because the field is kind of small. I do know a lot of indie creators, not just like on the internet, but like in person. It's a small field. With that said, I think that there is room for honest, thoughtful critique as long as it's respectful. I'm not gonna go out of my way to be nostalgia critic levels of absurd, but I do want to make reviews that are insightful and thoughtful, and keep in mind too that the reviews that I put forth are gonna be from my perspective and with my background. Your mileage will vary because you don't have the same experiences that I do when approaching the same or similar kinds of comic work. Like, whenever I approach like Heart of Darkmeat, my perspective on it is going to be different from your perspective on it. All I can do is provide my perspective. It's not the perspective. It is not the only one. I would like to think that the perspective does at least bring forth an idea that the creators hadn't considered before, or provide fresh new insight on a piece of work. Because I'll tell you right now, as an indie creator, it gets kind of lonely and very quiet. A lot of other creators that I know, that whenever they come up with an idea and they start working on the story idea, they don't really tell a bunch of people what the idea is. And I could talk for days about the absolute not necessity of keeping ideas to yourself, but that's a different video for a different day. Point being, I think I do want to review indie comics and novels, but especially indie comics. And also because reviewing indie comics isn't really like that big of a field to begin with. Like, aside from myself, I'm not aware of very many other people that review indie comics like in vlog format. There are people that write articles about them for the comic websites, but I don't know anybody that does like vlog format stuff like I do. While some people approach comic reviews as kind of like an opportunity to signal boost, to be like, hey, there's this comic that exists, I would rather be able to look at a comic and say, I think this is a strong piece because of this, although this element could be worked on a bit better. That's all for now. Keep an eye out on my blog. That link is going to be in the description as well. I will be updating that much more consistently between now and the end of February. Next video is not going to be out until after February 23rd. Thank you for watching. You are awesome.